6,020 year anniversary of the creation of the universe, according to some folks. So today's about the failure of time. I have a little poem for you. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, Mary went, Mary went. Everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. He followed her one day to school one day, to school one day, to school one day. He followed her to school one day, which was against the rules. It made the children laugh and play, laugh and play, laugh and play. It made the children laugh and play to see the lamb at school. Okay.
That was random.
That was random. Question, what year and day did Mary take the lamb to school?
One day.
One day. So that's, of course, a very silly question. It's a stupid question, right? And even fictional stories with sophisticated timelines like historical fiction or even Star Trek do not have real times in their they don't really have real events that correlate with the actual universe. And a lack of a sensible timeline is a hallmark of fiction, I think. And the Bible is like this. Genesis is just a fable, and there are problems throughout the Bible. The purported events did not actually occur on the timeline of the real world as we know it. And so it's fiction. So I wanted to talk briefly about the age of the universe, Noah's flood, Tower of Babel, birth of Jesus, and Jesus' return. There's many other problems along these lines. When you want to talk about the age of the universe, you either get a couple different answers from Christians. You get the young Earth creationism, which says the universe is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and there's a lot of fuzziness in even that. And this largely comes from the Ussher chronology, which I cited earlier, Bishop Ussher, Ussher, if you want to look it up. Another answer you get from Christianity is whatever science says, right? We're going to defer to science because the Bible must be compatible with science, so the Bible can't be wrong and blah, blah, blah. So it's a bit of a cop-out, I think. And science says the universe is 13.82 billion years, which is quite a big variance between those two. That's kind of a crazy different amount of time. How Ussher arrived at it is he went through the Bible and added up all the begats and how old the various folks lived and tried to infer when they had children and all this stuff. And it's just a big steaming pile of bullshit.
By the way, I don't know how many people have actually read the Bible. I hear a lot of Christians assure me that it is beautiful and poetic and the best book ever written. But I challenge anyone to stay awake during those several pages or so of begat.
Right.
Here's some numbers.
Yeah.
It's not that good a narrative structure. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's pretty dull, and maybe the whole purpose of this thing was to make this very irrelevant part of the Bible somewhat relevant somehow. So the short answer is even if you get a young Earth version or an old Earth version of Christianity, they really don't have a clue, and there's no authority to whom they can ask. Because if there were an authority, we'd get a consistent answer from them and not this crazy wild span of ideas. You hear these various apologetics. Well, even the old Earth folks say, well, this whole day creation thing is one day is 80 jillion years or something, and you have to just put it in dog years or God years or something, and try to rationalize these numbers that the 6-day creation corresponds somehow with 13.82 billion years. My answer to that is I can make any sentence true if I get to redefine any word of my choosing to anything I want it to be, and that's really what's going on there. Is there's an attempt to redefine a day to be something else in order to retrofit this to make some amount of sense, and bunk on that. That's just a mind game for the stupid. Another apologetic you hear is the Bible is not a history or science textbook, but fine. Well, then nobody should be asserting it has a claim on truth, because it's not history. It's not anything of value then, in my opinion. So let's talk about the flood. Answers in Genesis, instead of throwing out this Usher chronology, they went with it. They doubled down. And Answers in Genesis says, using the Bible and well-documented historical facts and some math, we find that the flood began approximately 4,359 years ago in the year 2348 BC. Some may look for an exact date, that is month and day, but we're not given that sort of precision in the scripture.
I can remember in one of my favorite movies, Inherit the Wind, Spencer Tracy as the atheist lawyer hears a very precise number like that, and he says, is that standard time or daylight savings?
Right. Well, that's part of the reason what makes this Usher chronology so funny is he picked it out to the exact day, which is today, 6,020. But he also picked it out to the hour, so he knows what hour the universe was created, which is too funny, right?
Yeah. In both science and computer science, I think we refer to that as over precision of significant digits.
Right. Trying to weed way too much into this, and yeah, it's just suspicious in so many different levels. Well, as far as the flood goes, of course, we know we have like tree ring evidence that goes back 14,000 years at least. So there was no flood during that time that killed everything. So just forget that whole idea. The Tower of Babel, according to Archbishop Usher and quoted in Answers in Genesis, the date would have been near 2242 BC. And of course, we know that languages are much older. That's supposedly where all the different languages came from. Confusion sown by God. It's pretty silly Justo story trying to answer where language came from. On the birth of Jesus, there's actually a little problem with the birth of Jesus because the death of Herod the Great occurred in 4 BC, and Jesus was supposedly born before that because Herod was supposedly out to get him, booga, booga, booga. But the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Luke, Jesus was born in a period that Quirinius was governor of Syria, which was roughly 10 years after Herod's death. So it had to be before this time and after this time, after a later time. So there's a problem no matter how you slice it. There's no consistent timeline that can be given here, and so any date you would pick, it would be a guess, and no matter what date you pick, it would violate one or the other of those known facts. So you've got a problem here, as far as the Bible. On the second coming, we have in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, verily, this is Jesus saying, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So he's talking about his return and all the gnashing of teeth and good stuff that Christians are really anxious for have happen. And of course, generation is another one of those terms that ends up being, abused and redefined to suit the needs of the speaker. In all of Jesus' quotes, the generation that he was addressing has passed, even though they said that no. Verily I say unto you that there be some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in this kingdom, and that didn't happen. So this whole chronology thing is pretty messed up as well. So in conclusion, either the Bible is fictional and we shouldn't trust it as any sort of authority, or the Bible is factual and we should be readily able to put it in a timeline that matches the real world events and evidence we already have. But Christianity can't establish that sort of timeline, and they just use lame rationalizations to try to manipulate people who can't think for themselves in order to try to buttress this horrible mess. And no matter how you slice it, the Bible comes across as a fairy tale believed by the gullible. So it's either fiction or it's fiction. And that's the failure of Christianity.